Hello everyone, welcome back to our second month of Tool Time Tuesdays. So this month our challenge is to do some stitching or sewing on a layout. So I'm going to go with machine sewing. So I've got some thread to do that. Obviously I've got a sewing machine which is out of shot. And I'm going to be using some Vicki Boutin print shop papers and embellishments. So the papers I've chosen, I've actually started to cut them. So the first one is this one, which is a background paper, and I've cut it into two 6x6 pieces, and also this one. So I've gone with two circular designs. So that's a cardstock, the foundations cardstock, and this is a piece of paper from the collection. The other side's that, but we won't be using that. And then I'm going with more circles. I'm going to use these as some embellishments which will go on my layout, and I'm thinking I will be stitching them on. And then my photos for today are about this Whizzy Diz, which is why I've got this circle theme happening. It's one of our favourite things to do at the park. Before we begin, I want to talk about the materials we're going to be using. So obviously I need a sewing machine, of course. You could also hand sew if you prefer to do that. You'll need some scraps of paper. So I'm going to use these, but you could just cut out some circular shapes from scraps. Of course, your patterns and colours to coordinate, and that includes your thread that you use on your layout in this case. Right, now let's talk about design. So when you're thinking about doing a layout with sewing, you need to think about how you want your thread to look. So what sort of stitches you want. Do you want to create diagonal lines? Do you want to create a more free form design? You need to consider where you're going to add your sewing to your design on your layout. A pattern that's already on your printed paper, or you can design something completely different. So I'm going to do a double layout. So I'm looking at my papers. It's going to be double page. So when I'm thinking about how my design's going to go, for me, I'm going to use the design that's on the paper. So I'm thinking that I'm going to go like that and have these circles join up, and then on this side I'm going to run it like this and like this, and that is going to be the base of my layout. So when it comes to my stitching, I'll be doing stitching that flows with the design on my paper, and you can clearly see that it is circular. However, there's also some lines on this one, and these little lines here. So I'm going to somehow, when I stitch these papers together, I'm going to follow through with some of these gold lines, and I'll be using some goldy yellow thread for that. But I'm also going to include some stitching that's coming down the page or up the page. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is I've fussy cut out these circles from the paper that I showed you earlier, and somehow I'm going to incorporate these into my design as well. Now, I haven't really thought about how I'm going to do that, and I don't think I'll know what I'm doing with that until I've actually got my base stitching done. And then of course I have to think about where these photos are going to be placed on my layout, because that will also make a difference as to where I add these into the design. I might even cut some of these in half. We'll see what happens. Okay, so let's get on to the sewing part. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually join these papers together. So I'm just going to simply flip one over to start with and flip the other one over and try and carefully line them up and use some tape to tape them together. So first up, I'm just going to run some tape across there. I've got my double-sided tape here, running it straight across. Now I'm going to pull that tape off, and I'm going to put more tape on here. Make it a little bit wider and stronger. I'm taking those two pieces off. I'm going to put one more strip across the center. I'm just doing this so it will be nice and strong. And then on top of that, I'm going to use just some random strips to put over the top. Look, I've got this whole bag of them. What have we got here that's pretty boring? I'll just use this. So I'm just going to put that over the top. It's just going to strengthen it up a bit more, so my join will be stronger. There's something else in here that I can use. That's this, and that'll do. It doesn't really matter what you use, you're just trying to use some scraps. And that will make that stronger. If you've got any overlap there, just trim it off. So there's my first one joined together, and I need to do the same on the second sheet. So you can see I'm just doing lines up. I'm going to do a section through here, and I'll do some on this end as well, and then I will do the same on the other page. So I've stitched my lines on. I stitched some, continued on this gold circle with some yellow stitching around here. And now I've fussy cut out these circles, and I've just put them on with just a little bit of double-sided tape to tack them down. Okay, now I could have used actual fabric for this and stitched it onto my paper. I could have cut circles from scraps to use instead of using the Vicki Boutin paper and fussy cutting these shapes out. So if you're doing your layout, you might be geometric, you might be stitching on triangles, you might be stitching on squares, different shapes that are interesting to you. So once we've put our little scrap pieces in place, we're going to start sewing them. You could use straight stitching, you could use zigzag stitching, you could use any type of decorative stitch depending on the look that you're going for. So for me, I am going to be sewing these down with straight stitching. I might leave some of them. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to actually stitch through every single one, but we'll see. And the other thing is that when you start to sew, you need to make sure that you back stitch at the end and beginning of each line, and that will secure the piece in place and stop your stitching from unraveling. Now I'm stitching these on just straight across the middle using a straight stitch. I'm not even making sure that it's on the lines that are the pattern on the shape, just going where I feel it needs to be stitched. I'm not even worrying if they're the same length. And there's the first one done. I will trim off those in a moment. Okay, now I think I'm just going to stick with using the yellow goldy thread on each piece, not even changing it. You could match the colours if you wanted to. Okay, that's nice. And come in this way. Coming from here. Got too many threads caught up. There we go. Just going to do one more stitch along here. So you'll just continue doing your stitching for each circle. Okay, so we've stitched on our circles and we have used some straight stitching to hold them in place. We have stitched on and continued this gold circle around here, and we've added some zigzag stitching, and that's it really in regard to the sewing aspect of it. Now we need to add our photos, and I've got all these Vicki Boutin embellishments to add to my page as well, so I'm going to do that now.